good way of talking about where we've gone wrong in psychology is to draw a parallel with chemistry, and not particularly chemistry as a whole, but thermodynamics specifically. So in the past, up to maybe the second half of the 20th century, thermodynamics was the study of systems that are in equilibrium. And systems that are in equilibrium are the only systems we ever thought about. Things that stay in a fixed pattern and repeat themselves. That's what equilibrium is. Uh, a stone rolls down from the top of the hill to the bottom of the hill and stays there as it's found its equilibrium point. It's obeying the rule of gravity, which is telling it to get as close to the centre of the earth as it possibly can. But then it's stopped by the opposing force of electrostatic repulsion between which matter experiences when it comes up against other solid material objects. So it's found its equilibrium point, the balance of the two forces. That's where it's going to stay. And it's not going to do anything exciting. So to sum up what regular equilibrium thermodynamics is about, you could just say it's not very exciting. It's a study of not very exciting outcomes. It's a study of entirely predictable outcomes. Everything gets more and more predictable. That's the second law of thermodynamics. So it makes sense that when we were developing a system of psychology, we'd be looking at equilibrium states. It just comes naturally to us. It's exactly the same as mathematics. How for a long, long time we look at non-complex or linear equations instead clear of chaotic stuff. Not because chaotic stuff is a very small part and can be safely ignored, because actually chaotic stuff is the majority, but simply because we can't arrange it so neatly and tidily. We can't put it in the shelf and we can't arrange it on the shelf so neatly and tidily because it's chaotic. We just pretend it's not there because it upsets all our nice, neat theories. So it's the same thing when it comes to chemistry, and it's the same thing when it comes to psychology. So the number one equilibrium state that we take for granted in psychology is the self or ego. The ego is a resting place. It's a compromise between the different forces that are acting on us. We find that position, the position of agreeing as much as we can with the various conflicting forces that are on us. And we find some kind of stable spot, and we stay there. Not very exciting. We don't really see this though. We see the life of the conditioned self, the self that's put together by thoughts, or the self that comes into being as a result of imposing specific conditions, as being potentially very exciting indeed, because we have this whole list of ideas, exciting things that we can do, that the self can do. So this is how the self distracts itself from saying that actually, no matter what it does, it's not going to be very exciting, because it isn't very exciting, and nothing it does is, no matter how extreme it tries to be or how imaginative, it's all just the self doing its stuff. It's all just the self enacting itself, and promoting itself, extending itself. It's an empire. Whatever the self is, we don't look at it, but instead we project it out in the world, and we try to enforce it over everything else. And as long as we're doing that, we don't have to question it. So that's empire building for you. That's what the self does on lots of different levels. So the self is an equilibrium point, which means that we just take it for granted and we're never going to question it, and everything has to be about the self. That's our reference point. So therapy becomes all about reinstating the stability of that self. It comes back, going back to that self. There's a deviation, we bring it back. There's another deviation up there, we bring it back. This is what we do all our lives. We manage our situation, trying to maintain this equilibrium point, this equilibrium self. We have all these dreams about how life could be great for the self, but for the self in itself, just as itself, without its dreams, it's an incredibly tedious and boring situation. Equilibrium states aren't really part of life, you could say. Really, they're springboards or stepping stones to something else. They don't exist in themselves. But when we put up a flag and we say, yes, this is the final destination, which it isn't because there are no final destinations, that's how we make an equilibrium point. But then we have to keep hiding from ourselves the fact that we have arbitrarily decided that this is it, this is where I'm sticking my flag in, this is where I stop being curious about the world, this is where my interest ends. Which, having your interest end at a certain point is how you create the conditioned self. The reason the conditioned self is boring, tedious, sterile, futile, etc., 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 it's because it never ever changes. And if you live life with all the change taken out of it, because the change is the bit we don't want, you don't get life. You just get a freeze frame. And that fixed idea of who we are, which isn't true, but it could serve as a stepping stone maybe, but it isn't true in itself, extends outwards in a linear fashion forever and ever and ever. It never changes. And that creates pain. Because we're going against life not to change. Because everything changes when we don't change. We feel disconnected. More and more disconnected, more and more alienated. And this manifests as neurotic suffering. And then we try and cure that neurotic suffering by restabilizing the identity, by fixing the self. But no sooner have we got one wheel on the wagon than another wheel will come off. And the whole idea of maintenance, which is what our approach comes down to, it's all about maintaining this thing that we take for granted as the way things are supposed to be, and then fighting to defeat all the forces that would change that situation. We're anti-change, basically. We don't want to let go of this equilibrium self because we don't know what else is out there. We know what the equilibrium self is like. We know what its life is like. It's familiar. It's not threatening, but it's sterile. It's just the same thing over and over again. So if we were to have the perspective to say that there is no progress, there is no growth, there is no evolution for the conditioned self, there's just interminable self-preservation and self-perpetuation because of fear. So if we had the perspective to see that, that would be obviously quite a shock, and it would be a good shock because we would be more inclined to let go of the whole thing and stop managing. So managing, a term we love, emotional management, managing emotions, managing fear, managing anger, managing whatever the hell, really means trying to find the best possible equilibrium position. It's not going to be a happy place. It's not going to be a joyful place. It's not going to be a free place, but it might be stable. So we need to kind of find some kind of stable point of misery. Find the type of misery we like and stick with it and um, call it healthy living, call it being a good citizen, call it being mentally healthy according to the standards of a psychostatic society, a society that doesn't believe in human change. And this sounds so wrong to us because we think we're all about change. Look how quickly things are moving. Look how quickly AI is evolving. evolving. Look how quickly this, look how quickly that. And sure, that's the distraction. All the stuff is rapidly accelerating and changing. But never mind that. Look at the self, because all of that stuff is in service of the self. It's there to help stabilize the self, validate the self, promote the self, let the self get what it wants quicker because the self can't get what it wants quickly enough. And so it values getting things quickly an awful lot. It values control an awful lot. All of these things have to do with maintaining the equilibrium. But when we look at this self, the self that's managing stuff, controlling stuff, and doing all the things that it's supposed to do, when we look at this self, it doesn't change. It's a freeze frame, it's a static picture over and over again. So no matter what the hell goes on in the outside, even if we live in flying cities and teleport here, there, and wherever, doesn't mean a damn. It doesn't do anything if we're still stuck. It's not a compensation for being unable to psychologically grow, to have loads of tech. And at the same time, technology, there can never be a technology to help us grow psychologically, because technology specifically takes away our autonomy and causes us to adapt ourselves to an external mechanical kind of system, which just exacerbates the problem. So there's no way to, when we looked into this, there's no way to change. And yet, without this essential change, this essential movement, growth, blossoming, transformation, life is profoundly meaningless.